Good morning to my friends and family, and welcome to this episode of Jim's 5 a.m. Club. It's the dawn of another morning. It's the dawn of another day. But it's just not any day. To the Greeks throughout the world, to the Greeks throughout history, today is the 83rd anniversary of OXI Day, a day that shaped Greeks and Greece and its modern history. 83 years ago on this day, on the 28th of October 1940, Benito Mussolini sent an envoy to Greece with a message to the Greek Prime Minister of the day, Ioannis Metaxas, that he wanted the Greeks to surrender their sovereignty and allow the Italian forces to occupy and pass through Greece in order to do a military exercise, a military movement against the Soviet Union. And we Greeks, who have had a history of war, have had a history of illegal occupation, were alarmed and repelled and insulted by such a request. And the Prime Minister said to the envoy, "This means war. C'est la guerre" in French, which was transmuted by the Greeks into the famous words OXI. OXI, which means no. So the threats were very real to the Prime Minister of Greece, and the threats were very real to all of Greece, because Italy back then was, without a doubt, a superpower. It was a superpower in the air, it was a superpower on the water, with great military strength and naval strength, and it was light years ahead of Greece in terms of capability and a serious threat. But Metaxas, to his credit, uttered these words to the Greek population: "The moment has come that we will fight for the independence of Greece, for her integrity and for her honour. Greece and Greeks, now is the time for us to prove if indeed we are worthy of our ancestors and the freedom that our forefathers secured for us. Our nation as a whole will rise united as one body, fight for our homeland, our women, our children, our sacred traditions. Now we fight for everything." And with those words, the church bells throughout all of Greece tolled incessantly, non-stop, and it was the message, it was the call to action for all the men, all the capable men of the time, the generation of young, strong men, to be called to the effort to defend Greece and to defend their parents, their children, and everything that they had taken for granted for so many years, but were really, really important. And my grandfather, Petros Dimitrios Kalpaxis, was one of the many who answered the call. People dropped everything, amassed in numbers, and had one thing on their mind: to defend Greece, to defend their families, and to defend everything that is critical and important to them. So much so that my grandfather left his family, left his wife, left his children. My auntie Frida, my Theavula, was born on the 26th of October 1940, and 2 days later my grandfather Petros was called to war. So he left his wife and his newborn daughter and went to war, not knowing whether he would ever come back alive, not knowing whether he would ever see his family again, not knowing if he would ever come back to his village, and his future, like everybody else's future in war, was completely messed up. So what happened next is really important. And in order to put it into context, what I need to do is just to let people know that Germany under Hitler, and he was united with Mussolini, so the Italian forces and the German forces were part of something which are known as the Axis forces, the evil Axis forces. And Germany had declared war on the world and had annihilated countries. For example, France was only able to resist for 43 days before it surrendered. Britain was bombarded and destroyed. Norway lasted 61 days, Poland 30, Holland 4, Yugoslavia 3 days. And the mighty Vikings, the mighty Danes, the people that everybody look up to as being some of the bravest people in the world. The envoy went into Denmark on his motorbike and went to the king with a letter of demand, and the king surrendered right there on the spot without a whimper, and gave the envoy his crown as a sign that he and his country had surrendered. The mighty Vikings surrendered with not even a glimmer of hope. And mighty Greece, to her credit, resisted for 219 days. The Greeks knew that there is no way in the world that they could ever win this battle or win this resistance. But they continued to fight. They continued to be irritants. They irritated Mussolini. They irritated Hitler, to the point where they engaged on that very, very first day up in the Pindus Mountains in northern Greece, on the border of Greece and Albania. They engaged the Italian forces, and not only did they repel them and push them back, but they chased them back through Albania and embarrassed the hell out of them. The Greeks, for the first time, showed the world that Hitler, Mussolini, and their combined Axis forces were indeed defeatable. They gave the world a glimmer of hope at a time where everybody was depressed and scared and thought that there is no way in the world that the power of Italy and Germany could ever be defeated. So not only did the Greeks kick the Italians' ass in this particular battle, it was a clear voice of opposition to fascism, to despotism, to being bullied, being treated as second-rate, because the Italians thought that the Greeks were going to be a certain pushover. All they had to do was to threaten them, and the Greeks were going to cower and go and hide in a corner and allow the Italians to seek strategic military positions in Greece and to pass through Greece and to go on and cause greater havoc. But the Greeks, to their credit, the Greeks who were outnumbered, who were out-resourced, there were people who left their villages in bare feet, without any military uniform, and went to fight. To fight for what? To fight for the things that Greece is renowned for: freedom, honour, and to do the right thing, not only for themselves, but for the other countries around the world. So what else do we know? What happened is that Mussolini was an egotist, and his ego basically cost him his leadership. And Hitler was very, very angry and pissed off that Mussolini did this on his own accord without being part of the accord that he had agreed to. And Hitler needed then to go and fix the mess that Mussolini had created. Hitler then had to re-divert his forces that were going round the top of Europe and heading to the Soviet Union, and he had to split his army, to split his resources in order to send resources to defeat Greece, to defeat the naughty Greeks, and to teach us a lesson. So of course it takes time to redivert resources, and Hitler got to Greece, of course, and there was an ensuing battle named the Battle of Greece and the Battle of Crete. But because Greece was such a strategic place in this battle, the English and the Australians had supplemented the Greek military force with their armies. The Australians were the second Anzacs. We had the first Anzacs go to Gallipoli, and some of those people actually fought again in Greece as older men, as well as younger people who came as well. So the second Anzacs were the ones who fought side by side, shoulder to shoulder with the Greeks, and died by their side. There are Anzacs who fought in Greece and died in Greece, not supporting their own country, their own battle. They were fighting for the freedom of Greece and for democracy to be honoured. So the last big battle was in Crete, where Hitler deployed his paratroopers a massive, massive campaign where thousands upon thousands of German soldiers were parachuted onto the island of Crete, and it was the biggest mistake that he had ever made, because what happened was that the Cretans, the English and the Anzacs were there, and they were ready for a fight. They were ready for a stoush. And more German soldiers died in that exercise than I think anywhere else in the war. And so much so that Hitler said that he was no longer going to have his paratroopers deployed in a similar fashion, because it was an absolute disaster. So Hitler rediverted his forces, sent them through Greece to teach the Greeks a lesson. But the Greeks, as we said, resisted for 219 days, which was fantastic. And what happened next is interesting and very, very sad, because with the Germans coming through Greece, with the occupation of the Italians, the Bulgarians and others, Greece was raped and pillaged. The economy was absolutely destroyed. And the final act, of course, is that Hitler did go on with his German forces to the Soviet Union, but they were defeated in that battle. And some say that if it wasn't for the Greeks, then the Germans would have gone via the north as they'd planned, the Nazis, and they would have most certainly have gotten to the Soviet Union during the earlier part of World War II, and the outcome would have been academic. The Germans would have won the war, potentially. But because the Greeks resisted, because they resisted a lot and caused this disturbance, this irritation, it changed the plans and it changed the course of World War II to the point where the Germans, the Nazis, got caught up in the winter, the bitter winter, and they couldn't get their supply lines through, and all the other issues that they faced, which caused them to basically be defeated. But if it wasn't for the Greeks to stand up, if it wasn't for the David of the time to stand up to Goliath and say, fuck you, and fuck fascism, and fuck the bullies, then World War II would have been a different outcome. As I mentioned before, the Greeks showed the world, proved to the world what was possible when you rise up as one and fight with everything you've got, because you've got everything to fight for. When it comes to fighting, it's not the size of the warrior, but the size of their heart, the size of their why. And we Greeks have proven time and time again through the history of time that we are the defenders, we are the true defenders of democracy, we are the true defenders of freedom, and we will give our life for that basic right. And today is a day where the Greeks throughout the world celebrate this momentous occasion, where the Greeks stood up to the Axis forces and said to them, OXI, c'est la guerre in French, which was transmuted to no. We will not surrender without a fight. And fight they did. And today we can look back with pride and say that our ancestors, my grandfather, who were accidental heroes, they were there and they had no other choice but to fight and to do whatever they could to defend the freedom of Greece, which ultimately translates to the freedom of the world. Because if you don't fight for the things that you believe in, you'll end up accepting all the other rubbish that other people want for you. If you don't have a dream, others will impose their dream on you. And the Greeks know this. And sadly, following World War II, following the occupation, the illegal occupation by the Germans, the Nazis, the Bulgarians, the Italians, who absolutely raped and pillaged the Greek economy, leaving it in tatters when they left, Greece then added insult to injury by having the ugliest and worst civil war in the history of Greece, where father and son were pitted against each other, where villages were split in two, where you couldn't trust anybody, and the onslaught of this civil war once again destroyed Greece. And for that reason, many Greeks, the youngest, the brightest, the strongest, when they found an opportunity to get up and go, just got up and went and left. My parents came to Australia, other people went to Canada, other people went to America. People just left in droves because the Greek economy was destroyed. It just couldn't support all of the hungry mouths. So some people, and usually the strongest and bravest and most capable, had to get up and leave. And thank God, my family, a lot of people in my father's chorio, my mother's chorio, came to this wonderful country called Australia, which is the homeland to a lot of people, to a lot of cultures, where the people have been displaced through war, through poverty, through many, many different reasons. And we thank Australia, we thank Sydney for welcoming us and allowing us to have a second home, a place that will look after us and our future generations, and a place that is our second home. One of the beauties is that for all Greeks, we have two homes. We've got Greece and we've got Australia. And like Ulysses, like the mighty Odysseus, Greece continues to pine for us. If you go to Greece and look under every stone, if you look closely at every grain of sand, what you'll see is your name indelibly engraved on it. The wind, the zephyr, continues to call our names and to call the names of all of its sons and daughters who left under trying conditions back in the 50s, just after that Second World War, that wasn't of our own doing, and that ugly, ugly civil war that just shows that when times are tough, it sometimes brings out the very, very worst in even the best people. So thank you very much for allowing me to chat to you today It is a very special day, as I say. I remember my grandfather today, and I remember all of those who fought and the anguish and trauma that our collective families have been through. I love listening, wherever possible, to the songs of Sophia Bellew, who I remember my grandfather used to listen to the songs. He'd have his glass of wine or his glass of whiskey, and he'd sit there in the corner with his cigarette, and he'd be listening to the old Sophia Bellew songs. There we go. We've got our little seal here as well. They'd be listening to the Sophia Bellew songs, and he'd be just crying. He would never talk about the war. As I say, he went as a young man. He saw things that he would never tell us what he saw. He'd never be able to express himself, because that was the way that generation was back then. Whenever we'd ask and talk about the war, he'd start off, but before long, he'd be crying and he'd become a child again. And it was just so sad to see such a strong man, such a strong man, being reduced to tears, and to not just tears, he'd be bawling. I remember seeing him, rubbing his eyes and bawling, and everybody around him crying as well. It just makes me teary as well, just thinking about it. Anyway, I'll leave it here, so thank you very much. And a mighty OXI to all those bullies that we have in the world. And just stand up, because without fighting, you just don't gain anything in life. And we need to remember that we need to continue the fight, because today's 8 is tomorrow's 6. And whatever you give up, you never get back. So, brothers and sisters, let's remember our relatives, let's remember our grandparents, our parents, and all of those wonderful, wonderful people who fought for the dignity and the survival of freedom and democracy, and may they live forever, and may God remember them all in the second coming. Yassas, take care, and all the best to my friends and family. Bye for now.